Howdy folks, welcome back to the channel. If you've been around for any significant amount of time, you of course know this is my 1961 International Scout that I've been working on reviving. This thing sat in a field like 150 miles away from here for like 40 years. This thing had been sitting since the late 1970s, and I've been working my butt off all winter to really bring it back to life, and I hope to get it on the road eventually. With all that aside, of course, you guys know I've been through the axles and I've been through the engine, and I had the transmission and transfer case out. And what I found out when I had those out, when I put them back in, I went to put fluid in the transfer case, all the fluid came right out. So what we're up to today is I'm going to fire this thing up, take it on down to the shop. I've got a battery in the service truck behind me. And we're going to replace and fix the seals for the transfer case so that it will retain its fluid. And then I'm thinking hopefully I'll have time and we'll get the rear bumper on this thing, because I've really been looking forward to that. So let's get to it. Okie doke. Got the little baby battery thrown in here. Let's see if we have any life inside. I don't know if that battery has any life left in it. I think it was on the charger earlier, but oh yeah. Let me just close up the hood here and we'll take this thing on down to the shop. Alrighty, and away we go. There we go. Perfect. Alrighty, so here's what we've got going on here. I've got new transfer case output seals, and I went ahead and picked up speedy sleeves for the output yokes. Of course, I don't know that they're all marred up and whatnot. Of course, speedy sleeves, they go over and they're essentially a repair for the sealing surface on the yokes. So, of course, this thing has seen a lot of miles, and when I've gone through everything else, literally everything on this Scout has been just clapped. So I went ahead and picked up speedy sleeves, and we'll see if I need them or not. But we're going to do the seals. So, of course, first things first, I got to pull the front and rear drive shafts, and just so we can get to the yokes and then pull the yokes themselves. So I'm going to dive in. Alrighty, here's where we're at. If you guys can see, through whatever reason my camera's being all fuzzy now, but rear drive shaft's off. I went ahead and pulled the front off as well. I pulled that front drive shaft all the way off because the front axle needs a pinion seal. So if I just leave the front drive shaft out, I can do a pinion seal later. I already got this cotter pin off. I have to still do the front, but all I should have to do now is break this big nut free, get it out of the way. This yoke should come off, and the seal should be right behind here for me to replace. Alrighty, so we got the rear yoke off, and I just went ahead and got it all spruced up here in the cleaning solution. And yeah, we can kind of see that, you know, that's not exactly right. I think this thing busted off a U-joint cap, and then the U-joint wore into this thing, and they must have just drove on that for miles and miles and miles. Just look at the wear on that thing. It's broken off up here, but down here it's all smooth, like it got worn on by something for a long time. So I'm going to go out to the parts pile and see if I don't have another rear yoke off of Dana 18, because that is not, well, I don't really want to send that. Alrighty, the old part stash coming in clutch. I'm gonna get that guy yoinked off of there and we'll see if it'll work. Alrighty, got this guy off. It was no sweat. It's identical to the old one. Looks like the spline count's just right. Not like I've actually counted. I'm just gonna clean this guy up and crawl under there and try and put it on and be very angry when it doesn't fit. Funny thing, when I pulled this guy off, I see it has a felt seal in here. Obviously that will soak up the oil and help lubricate things, and also keep oil from slipping past this yoke. When I took this one off just now, off the Scout, it did not have that felt. So that's not right. Of course, this has probably been off before, so that's neat. So I'm going to set this felt seal aside. I'm going to go ahead and wire brush and degrease this new yoke so that it's all nice, clean, and shiny so I can put it under my greasy Scout. Alrighty, got the rear yoke all ready to reinstall. The only thing I have to do, of course, I installed this speedy sleeve, and I did have to use a bit of metal paste epoxy is what it calls for. And it calls for that when this is worn down enough that it's not going to be a good press fit for the speedy sleeve itself. So that's what I went ahead and did. If it is a good press fit for the little sleeve, then you can just use a non-hardening sealer is what they call for. And then these things are real handy. They come with this little tool. This is the install tool. It just goes right down. So that one's on there. All I have to do is cut this little flange off so that this felt can go in here. The instructions even say if you have to cut that little flange off, they tell you how they want you to cut that little guy off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I just pulled this front yoke off, and hopefully you guys can see that that is very noticeably worn. This one's more worn than the rear one was. Either rear one. This is more worn than both of those. So I'm going to go ahead and get this guy cleaned up. I'll have to do the exact same thing with the metal epoxy paste whatnot, and get the speedy sleeve on this guy, and then we'll be ready to put the seals into the transfer case, and then put the yokes back on, and then gear oil. Alrighty, transfer case seals are done on the old Scout there. The rear one went just fine. The front one came out in tiny little wonderful chunks, kind of like that, which that really sucked. I don't know what in the world was going on with the front output seal. Somebody monkeyed around in there, did some nonsense. That front seal was like welded in there. I ended up chiseling it out, and then I got it cleaned up, and well, frankly, there's a lot of RTV around the outer perimeter of the new seal so that hopefully it doesn't leak. I'm not proud of that, but just the way she goes sometimes. Huge shame that that happened, but it's back together now. Of course, like I said, I left the front drive shaft out of there. I have to do the front axle pinion seal in the future here, so there's just no point in putting the front drive shaft back in. And, well, it's summertime, so I don't need the pinion seal. Up next, I think I'm going to run up the driveway here. We're going to start putting the parts Scout. We'll put the front end back together so I can get my jack stands up from under that thing. And then once the front end's back together, we can pull it out and get the rear bumper for this Scout. So that, you know, I feel confident to, you know, just rally right into the things with the old Scout here in reverse. Because that's just what you do. While we're up here, I'm having a look here at the red Parts Scout. You guys met this thing last summer when you met my Scout, actually. And, well, I'm looking for a few more odds and ends and whatnot to do with this thing. I've got parts I need to pull off for my blue Scout. One thing I need to do is actually put this front axle back together so that this thing can sit on the ground and I can have my jack stands back, which would be cool. I'm gonna see if this fuel filler neck is any good, because mine was in horrible shape and it's all broken and gone now. This rear bumper I'm gonna snag for my Scout. Maybe I'll see if the taillight wiring is any good, because I have no wiring from the front of the Scout back. all the taillight wiring, fuel gauge, all that, it got ripped out long time ago, so I need to go through that. You can see I already pulled the center button off the steering wheel. It's in the glove box, is where I put it. I need this turn signal knob, so I'm going to start pulling the steering wheel off of here to get that out, and yeah, I'm just pulling parts basically, so. Alrighty, well, slight change of plans. You can see that I got the service truck up here. The old Scout is up in the air. I'm going to ferry this Scout on down to the shop. What I did not really account for was the bolts on the rear bumper being impossible to get out. So I'm going to take it down to the shop where it's not Amish country and we have power tools, so that I can cut the bolts out of this bumper without absolutely maiming it. Because the bumpers on this Scout were the great selling point for me, is that this rear bumper is almost perfect and it's going to look great on my other Scout. And I'd thought about, and still really want to, but I don't know, this grill guard built into this bumper. I absolutely love this setup that somebody built on this Scout. So that is, those were the big selling points on this thing. So anyhow, this thing's going to be down at the shop, and I'll just pull everything that I need for my other Scout, the 61. I'll pull everything that I need off of this thing then, and we can, basically, I don't have to worry about it anymore. So yeah, good times. Alrighty, we're in the big money now. We got rear axle under this thing, and I did a real top-notch spring over axle upgrade on this thing. Oh yeah, this is my new wheeling rig, you know, she's mint. Now, in all seriousness, this is an old Dana 44. This came out of my step side. Pinion's sloppier than I'll get out on this thing, so obviously it leaks gear oil and whatnot, but it'll roll, and that's all this Scout needs to do. And of course, greasy old used U-bolts on there. I threw the blocks of wood in so I didn't have to tighten them that much, because if, you know, any of you guys have ever worked with old U-bolts, you know that the nuts will never thread on nicely, and so it's just, yeah. But this thing's a roller now, so I can roll it right into the shop. It's almost impossible to back something up with the gin pull truck as well, and then I can roll this thing back to its parking spot when I'm done getting all my parts off of it, and it can sit up with the back of the Scout not sitting on the ground. So all around a good thing. So I'll get this thing unhooked and throw her in the shop. Things are escalating around here. Got the steering column out of the red Scout. What I had initially only needed was the turn signal lever, because the one in the blue Scouts is broken. But I've noticed that the blue Scout's steering column that has a lot of in and out play. I can show you on here. I got the steering wheel off of this thing as well. I picked up the right size bolts for the puller so that I could pull the steering wheel without doing a bunch of damage. But with the steering wheel pressed in there, this thing still has a lot of up and down play. And what I found is that it's got something to do with this lower bearing. You can see parts falling out and whatnot here. So I've decided I'm going to pull both steering columns out and I'll hash them together. I want this steering column back in this Scout and that steering wheel, because these are really nice parts. They're in nice shape. But I need the bearings out of this steering column, as well as this little guy, this plastic piece that covers the steering column. because somebody at some point, I am almost dead certain, had the steering column out of this Scout, because that piece is missing and has been since I bought it. So what I have to do is pull this steering column out of this one, which is 2 bolts inside that you reach up under the dash, these 2 guys, and then I pulled these guys out of down here. They're just those little 7/16 bolts with the little keepers on them. And then all I have to do now is manage to wiggle this steering column out. There's a pin that comes down to this, out of this plastic isolator deal. There's a pin that sits in the steering column to keep it straight up and down. And well, that one I managed to jiggle it out of there to get the steering column out. This one I'm going to try and do something different. I don't really know. I'm making it up as I go. So we'll try and get this steering column out. We'll get both together and we'll have a look. You can see parts are just falling out of this steering column. I want the turn signal mechanism out of the other one because it looks nicer. You can see there were all kinds of dirt daubers or whatever, bunch of junk that was in this Scout. But the steering wheel is still all nice and smooth, and the steering column is pretty shiny still because all these parts have been undercover for the last 40 years, and those parts, I'm pretty sure that Scout hasn't had a top on it in the last 40 years. So these parts are nicer looking, those parts are nicer functioning. So we'll put the two together. Alrighty, well, I didn't want to have to do it, but I'm going to put this column in my blue Scout. This is the column out of the red Scout. The reason why I didn't want it is because it's, well, not pretty. The old one out of the blue Scout here is in really nice shape, if you ask me anyhow. But that lower bearing for the steering column has no ball bearings left in it. And I have no idea how to get that out of there. If it's anything like old bump side Fords, it's spot welded in and there's no good way to get it out. You have to basically cut it out and then replace it with some kind of aftermarket nonsense. I don't want to do that right now, so that's going to stay there. I slipped and slided these bearings up with some white lithium grease, so they're good and healthy. We'll slide this column in. Of course, I labeled my wires under the dash, as you should do. And for those of you that were curious, I did get the other one out much easier. The bracket that holds the steering column up, the upper bracket, is held in by 3 bolts. 1 bolt, 2 bolt, 3 bolt. The 3rd bolt, you have to pull the heater box off of the cowl to get to. And I'm pretty sure that's just an early Scout thing. It might be a later Scout thing. I don't know. But anyhow, that's what we've got going on. I'm going to go ahead and slip this this column back in. You can see that when I pulled the one out of this blue Scout, the shaft stayed, which is perfectly fine for me. Everything I need's on here. So we can just pop this guy in. Alrighty, rain just started. I just got this thing all bolted in here. It's all good to go. I still have to wire it up, but I took care of all of the trinkets to getting that in there. Lower bearings all set up. Bolts are all tightened, and then under this cover is the slip dealy, the U-joint, I guess. I schmucked a bunch of grease in there because all the grease in there was, well, antique. And yeah, now I just have to hook up the wires. I had to pull the e-brake setup, had to come down because the second bolt is hiding right up there. So I had to go ahead and take that out of the way. So I got to put that back, put these wires back together. I got to put the turn signal lever back on. It's over here, and then we should be good to go. And theoretically, when I hit the turn signal lever there, I'll have, well, at least turn signals on the dash. There's none of the wires exist for the turn signals elsewhere. You guys have probably noticed there's no taillights on this thing. I have the taillights, but there's no wires that run to them, so that's always fun. However, yesterday I did get this turn signal bucket put in. I've got lenses on the way, and I have the little rings that hold the lenses on, so it'll look a lot better from the front, and then I'll put the taillights back in for the time being, and I'll fix the wiring eventually. I'm pretty sure the front turn signals should work, but there's no wires from pretty much here back. So I don't have anything for the fuel tank, and I don't have anything for the taillights. When I got this thing, all the wires were bunched up right here under the fuel tank. It was a nasty conglomeration, and they shoved it all through an old hydraulic hose, I think, to as kind of a shield to run the wires to the back. It was a disaster. So all that's gone, and I'm just going to run new wires for the taillights, turn signals, and all that. But for the time being, that's what I'm going to do. Just like that, we're done here. Steering is way tighter, a lot nicer, but unfortunately, still don't have turn signals. Not 100% sure what's with that. Wires are hooked up where the wires should be. I don't think there's something up with the turn signal cam. It must be flasher wiring somewhere. I'm not 100%, but oh well. On to the next thing. Turn signals aren't super important to me right now, but that steering column play in and out was bothering me, and then I've always wanted to install the new turn signal lever because it always bothered me that the old one broke off. So that's taken care of. I'm going to clean up my tools here, and then we'll put a bumper on here, I think. Well, before I got the bumper put on, I had to go ahead and put my taillights back in. I've always had these. I took them out because, like I said, the wiring's all messed up back here, and I was going to fix it. Now I'm lazy, and I don't really want to fix the wiring right now, so I just put the taillights in. It looks so much better. Fun fact, I haven't had the taillights in this thing for like 3 years, so, well, I missed it. They're back again. These are the original taillights. They've always just been sitting in the back here with the rest of the parts. There's the original license plate. I've got a couple mirrors. There's actually the gas cap. I pulled that out because I pulled the whole fuel filler neck out. That's another thing I need to fix. The old fuel filler neck was so nasty and dry rotted and cracked up. When I pulled it out, it just fell into a million pieces. I still need to order one of those, but the price is still not settling with me. But there's a rag in here that's keeping all this mud out of the gas tank, so that's good. I probably shouldn't run this thing through the mud so much, but it's just so much fun. Let's get the bumper on here. Well, how about that? I just set the bumper down here to size it up, make sure it would actually fit. I'm like 98% sure it should. And of course, these tear out the holes. I noticed that on this red one here. You can see that one was tearing and this one is torn. Well, somebody made these guys. I was half considering it. I got some really big washers, but somebody already made these little guys. They go in the back side. So when, you know, you get this thing hopelessly stuck in the mud and you're just pulling on the bumper, you don't rip out this back panel. So I'll definitely put those to use. Good stuff. You know, every now and then I do this little thing called thinking. If I was thinking, I would have taken a like before photo of this thing before I started putting this bumper on. Well, I didn't, but we're getting it there. Just slowly picking up on the old janky floor jack until I get the bolt holes lined up. Alrighty, we have bumper. It is about time. You can see I put the big fender washers on the outside. Of course, like I said, these things like to rip out, so I've got the big plates on the other side. Of course, I don't intend to do anything super heavy with this Scout. I don't intend to go get it stuck and be yoinking on this bumper a whole lot, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. Of course, dealing with the 60-some-odd-year-old sheet metal here, you know. But now that we got that taken care of and we got the turn signal housing on, the steering column's taken care of, this thing is great. This thing is nice and tight now. I really like it. It's a lot better than it was before. I don't even know what else. I was gonna put the fuel filler back on there just for looks, but like it really matters. I just need to order the I need to order the hose that goes to the tank there for that. But yeah, the old Scout, she's looking better and better every time I work on it. So I don't know. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the shenanigans here today. I'll show you the bumper mounting real quick. So this bumper, I don't know if it's added or not, but it's got the lower bolts. You can see the bolts are all shiny. I put new ones on. I think those lower ones that go down there, I think those were added by somebody, but then the other bolt goes up. You can just see it's shiny up in there in the notch in the frame, and that's where the bumper bolts to. So it's just these 4 little 3/8 bolts that hold the bumper on here, so I don't think it's going to be the most structurally sound thing in the world, but it's on there. So we got that taken care of. And shoot, yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna call her a video here. I got a lot of work done on this little thing. Here the other night, actually, I went ahead and hooked up the vacuum gauge to the little 4-cylinder, and I tuned on the carburetor a smidge, adjusted the idle air, and then I adjusted on the timing a smidge, so it's running a lot smoother now, and it fires up a lot easier. We'll see if it'll start right now for us. Oh yeah. Anyhow, of course, I don't know how it looks from your guys' end, but I feel like I got a lot done on the old Scout here tonight, or in this video. This has been like a week's worth of work. I am super happy to have the bumper on there. It looks pretty nice. I actually, now that it's on here, I think it's a little low, but it's a stock Scout 80 bumper, and it looks perfect on this Scout. It blends right in with the scenery, so... Anywho, with that said, enough of my rambling and thinking and whatnot. You guys aren't here for that, so thanks for watching. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Well, you wouldn't believe it, but right after I quit filming there last night, I cleaned up all my tools, and I found that guy in the dirt right here. This guy is one of the 2 doodads that go in here. These are the little pins, basically go on either side of that coupler there, and it totally fell off while I took the steering column out of the Scout here, and now I have to put it back in. So instead of take the whole steering column back out, I'm going to do what I've been meaning to do. I'm going to pull the steering box out. We'll give this thing a nice shine up, and I kind of want to investigate what's going on with the chain going over that, as well as the dual brackets that we've got going on here. So we'll have a look at that, and when the steering box is dropped out, then of course this coupler, I'll pull these 2 guys out. This will slide right out, and I can put this guy back on. So more work, but away she goes. Well, I went ahead and pulled a wise guy move. I didn't unhook the steering linkage from the steering box before I dropped it, so it's permanently connected because it needs to be secured for me to get that ball out of there, but that's beside the point. It's all right. I've been cleaning this thing up, obviously. It's all nice, and it looks like it's aluminum now instead of just a clump of dirt that magically steers the Scout. You can see those two guys right there are the bolt holes. They got torn out of here. I think this was just a common issue with these things, and obviously somebody modified and built those straps and then wrapped that chain around the steering box to keep it steady. I'm sure this thing got absolutely rallied, so she's seen a few miles. And if you're curious, yeah, I'm going to put this steering box back on with those straps, and I'm going to put the chain back around it for show. It's not going to do anything, but I don't know. I assume they went a long time with those straps over this thing. It seems pretty stout. I can see no visible flex in it when somebody moves the steering wheel back and forth and I look at the steering box. So I'm going to send it like that. I think it looks cool, and it's definitely part of this Scout's history. Alrighty, and after sitting here for about 30 minutes with this little tiny wire brush, I've got this thing about yay clean. That's pretty good for me. It'll be a lot more serviceable in the future. And I didn't get the backside quite as well, but that'll be just fine. Nobody's going to see that. It's not like that's going to cause any issues. I just wanted this thing a lot cleaner than it was. So now I'll get the little tab put in, and I can get the steering box mounted back up, and I'll try and put all that shenanigans back together up there. Alrighty, steering box is all back together. Of course, I had to put the chain back on for posterity's sake. It's just so funny that somebody thought it was so necessary to put that chain around it. I just had to leave it, but steering box looks a whole lot nicer, and I actually put a ton of time in. Well, a ton. I put like 30 minutes in was all it really took, and I just went around here with degreaser. I had a little garden sprayer full of Dawn dish soap and a little brush, and I just went around and cleaned and tidied up this whole engine bay. It looks a whole lot nicer. Now you can see all the original blue coming out. It makes the outside look more ratty, but way of the road. So she looks a whole lot nicer. Up next, I guess we'll pull her up by the house, and we'll give this thing its first wash in probably 45, 50 years. It has been sitting since 1978, before I got it, that is. And yeah, we'll give this thing a good wash.